The day my son called me old and useless, I didn't cry. I smiled, nodded, and walked back to my kitchen like nothing had happened. But something inside me, something that had been holding on for dear life, finally let go. My name is Diane Marshall. 62 years old, widow, mother of 2, and according to my youngest son, completely worthless. I raised that boy with my own 2 hands, worked 3 jobs after his father died, put him through college, and watched him build a life I could only dream of. And now, standing in his marble-floored kitchen, in the house I helped him buy, I was nothing but a burden he tolerated out of obligation. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. Started small the way these things always do. Little comments here and there. Mom, that's not how we do things anymore. Mom, please don't touch that, it's expensive. Mom, maybe you should rest, you're getting older. I told myself he was just stressed, that his wife Madison was adjusting to having me around, that I needed to give them space. After all, I'd only moved in 6 months ago, after I lost my little apartment when the rent doubled. My son Ethan, my successful, ambitious, brilliant boy, had insisted I come live with them. We have plenty of room, Mom, he'd said. It's time we took care of you. But care wasn't what I found in that beautiful house in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. What I found was tolerance, barely masked resentment, and a growing sense that I was disappearing. Madison would sigh when I offered to help with dinner. Ethan would talk over me during conversations like I wasn't even there. And their 2 kids, my grandchildren, 7-year-old Riley and 9-year-old Connor, barely knew I existed beyond the old woman who lived in the back room. The day it all came crashing down was a Tuesday in April. Spring was trying to push through, but there was still a chill in the air, the kind that gets into your bones and reminds you of every year you've lived. I'd gotten up early, like I always did, unable to sleep past 5:30 no matter how late I went to bed. Old habits from decades of early shifts at the diner, the hospital cafeteria, the department store. My body still thought it needed to be somewhere, doing something useful. I made coffee quietly, trying not to wake anyone. The house was so silent in those early hours, so cold despite the expensive heating system. Everything in that house was expensive, from the Italian tiles to the German appliances, but somehow it never felt warm. I sat at the kitchen island, the one Madison had picked out from some boutique in Charleston, and watched the sunrise through windows so clean they looked invisible. That's when I heard the voices upstairs. Sharp, angry whispers that carried down through the vents. I shouldn't have listened, I know that now, but when you're invisible long enough, you start to hear things people don't mean for you to hear. I can't do this anymore, Ethan. She's driving me crazy. Madison's voice, tight with frustration. I know, babe, I know. Just give me a little more time to figure something out. Figure what out? She's your mother. She's not going anywhere unless you make her. What do you want me to do? Kick her out? She has nowhere to go. There was a pause, and then Madison's voice came back, softer but somehow more cutting. There are places, Ethan. Nice places. Assisted living facilities. She'd probably be happier there, around people her own age. She's 62, Madison, not 90. And those places cost a fortune. So does keeping her here. The groceries alone, and she's always messing with the thermostat, running up our utilities. Plus, I want to turn that room into a home gym. I've been patient, but it's been 6 months. I should have stopped listening. I should have gone back to my room, packed my things, and left right then. But I stayed frozen at that kitchen island, my coffee growing cold in my hands, listening to my son and his wife discuss me like I was a piece of unwanted furniture they needed to dispose of. Ethan's response was quieter, harder to hear, but what I caught made my chest tighten. You're right. I'll talk to her. Maybe. I'll look into some options. She's so sensitive. She'll make it into this big dramatic thing. Then don't make it dramatic. Just be honest. Tell her it's not working out. The conversation moved on to other things, their day, their schedules, complaints about Connor's teacher and Riley's violin lessons. Normal family stuff. The kind of conversations I wasn't part of anymore. I went back to my room before they came downstairs. It was a nice room. I couldn't deny that. Madison had decorated it in soft grays and whites, impersonal and hotel-like. There were no photos of my late husband James, no pictures of Ethan and his older brother Marcus as children, Nothing that made it feel like mine. I'd learned early on that Madison preferred a clean aesthetic, which apparently meant erasing any evidence that real people with real histories lived in her house. The morning routine continued as usual. Ethan came down in his suit, already on his phone, barely acknowledging me as he grabbed his coffee. Madison appeared in her workout clothes, hair pulled back, face perfectly made up even at 6:30 in the morning. The kids thundered down like a stampede, grabbing breakfast bars and arguing about whose turn it was to sit in the front seat of the car. "Morning, everyone," I said, trying to inject some warmth into the cold kitchen. Connor glanced at me. "Morning, Grandma." Riley didn't even look up from her phone. If you like the story, hit the like button. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Mom, can you make sure the house is locked up today? I've got back-to-back meetings and Madison has her charity thing. Ethan didn't look at me when he spoke, his eyes still on his phone screen. Of course, honey. Will you all be home for dinner? I thought I could make that pot roast you used to love. We're eating out tonight, Madison cut in, not unkindly, but with the finality of someone who'd already made all the decisions. Some clients of Ethan's. We'll probably be late. And just like that, they were gone. The garage door closed, the house fell silent, and I was alone again. This was my life now. Waiting in the margins of someone else's story, hoping to be useful, desperate not to be a burden, and failing at both. I cleaned the kitchen even though it was already clean. I did a load of laundry even though Madison had specifically asked me not to touch their clothes after I'd accidentally put one of her silk blouses in the dryer. I dusted the living room and vacuumed the hallway and tried to make myself indispensable, even as I knew it was hopeless. Around noon I made myself a sandwich and sat in the sunroom, looking out at the perfectly manicured backyard. This house had everything. A pool they never used, a garden maintained by professionals, a treehouse the kids had outgrown. So much space, so much wealth, and somehow I felt more cramped and poor than I ever had in my tiny apartment with its leaky faucet and broken air conditioner. My phone buzzed. A text from my older son Marcus, who lived in Seattle with his wife Vanessa and their 3 kids. Marcus checked in more than Ethan did, but he was far away, building his own life, dealing with his own challenges. I couldn't burden him with this. "How's it going, Mom? Kids want a video chat this weekend if you're free." I typed back. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Miss you all so much." What I didn't type. "Your brother wants to put me in a home. His wife can't stand me. I'm disappearing and I don't know how to stop it." The afternoon dragged on. I tried to read but couldn't focus. Tried to watch television but everything seemed too loud or too trivial. Finally, around 4, I decided to do something I knew I shouldn't. I decided to cook dinner anyway. I'd been careful about grocery shopping using my own money, my small social security check that barely covered anything. But I'd saved enough to buy the ingredients for Ethan's favorite pot roast, the one I used to make every Sunday when he was growing up, when money was tight but our little house was full of love and laughter. Maybe if I reminded him of those days, of who we used to be to each other, something would shift. I worked carefully, chopping vegetables, searing the meat, adding the special blend of herbs and wine that made the dish sing. The kitchen filled with rich, savory smells, the kind that turn a house into a home. I set the table, even used the nice dishes Madison kept for company, the ones I wasn't supposed to touch. I put out cloth napkins and lit candles. I was trying to create a moment, a memory, something that would cut through the cold distance that had grown between us. Ethan came home first, around 6:30. I heard his car in the garage, the door slam, his heavy footsteps. He walked into the kitchen and stopped. "Mom? What's all this?" "I made dinner," I said, smiling, hoping. "Your favorite. I know you said you were eating out, but I thought maybe we could have a family meal. Just like old times." His face did something complicated. Surprise, then irritation, then something that might have been guilt. "Mom, I told you we had plans." "I know, but it's been so long since we all sat down together. The kids could stay home, couldn't they? It would just be a couple hours." "Mom." His voice was sharp now, the way you'd speak to a child who wasn't listening. "We have plans. With clients. This is important for my business." "I understand that, honey, but..." "No, I don't think you do." He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from his childhood when he was frustrated. You can't just do whatever you want. This is our house, our schedule, our lives. You're a guest here. The word hit me like a slap. Guest. Not family. Not home. Guest. Ethan, I'm sorry, I just wanted. You just wanted what? To make everything about you. His voice was rising now, and I could see the stress of his day, of his life, of having me in his house, all bubbling to the surface. Do you know how hard it is, Mom? How hard I work to maintain this life. And you're here, constantly in the way, constantly needing something, constantly making me feel guilty for what? For being successful. For moving on. That's not fair, I whispered, but my voice had no strength. What's not fair is that I can't come home and relax in my own house. What's not fair is that my wife is stressed because you won't respect our boundaries. What's not fair is that at 62, you still don't have your life together and I have to fix it. The tears came then, hot and shameful. I lost my apartment, Ethan. I didn't have a choice. There are always choices, Mom. You could have saved money. You could have made better decisions. But you didn't, and now it's my problem. That's when Madison came in, her heels clicking on the tile. She took in the scene, the set table, the food, my tears, Ethan's angry stance, and her face hardened. Diane, we talked about this. We have plans tonight. I know, I just thought. That's the problem. Ethan interrupted, and his voice was cold now, so cold. You don't think. You're just old and useless, Mom. You don't understand how the world works anymore, how families work, how anything works. And honestly, I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Old and useless. The words hung in the air like smoke. I saw Madison's eyes widen slightly, saw her put a hand on Ethan's arm, heard her say his name in warning. But it was too late. The words were out there and they were true. At least they were true to him. I turned off the stove, blew out the candles, started to clear the table. Mom, I didn't mean, Ethan started, but I held up my hand. It's fine, I said, and my voice was steady now, eerily calm. You're right. I don't understand. I'll clean this up and stay out of your way. Diane, Madison began, but I shook my head. Really, it's fine. You two have a nice dinner. Tell the clients hello. I put the food in containers while they went upstairs to change. I washed the dishes, put away the nice plates, folded the cloth napkins. I moved like a ghost through that beautiful kitchen, and for the first time I felt like one. They left without saying goodbye. I heard them collecting the kids from their rooms, heard the rush of movement, the garage door opening and closing. Then silence again. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed. The gray walls closed in around me. Old and useless. Was that what I'd become? I thought about my life, really thought about it for the first time in months. I'd been 20 when I married James. He'd been a mechanic, strong and kind, with hands that could fix anything. We'd had Marcus right away, then Ethan 5 years later. Money was always tight, but we'd been happy. James worked long hours at the garage, and I worked whatever jobs I could find that let me be home when the boys got out of school. We'd lived in a small house in a working-class neighborhood, but it had been ours, full of noise and love and life. Then James died. Heart attack at 49, sudden and brutal. One day he was there, fixing the sink and complaining about the Braves pitching, and the next day he was gone. The boys were 19 and 14. Marcus was already in college on a scholarship, but Ethan was still at home, still needing so much. I'd worked 3 jobs for 4 years to keep Ethan in school, to make sure he could go to college, to give him the opportunities we'd never had. I'd been a waitress at a diner, a cleaner at a hospital, a cashier at a department store. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, lived on coffee and determination, sacrificed everything so my boys could have better lives. And they did. Marcus had his engineering degree, his beautiful family, his life in Seattle. Ethan had his business consulting firm, his big house, his successful wife. They'd escaped the cycle of struggle that James and I had been trapped in. They had what we'd always wanted for them. But somewhere along the way, I'd become invisible. Somewhere between raising them and watching them succeed, I'd forgotten to build anything for myself. I'd made my children my entire identity, and now that they were grown, I had nothing left. No career, no savings, no purpose. Just a woman taking up space in rooms where she wasn't wanted. Old and useless. I sat there for hours thinking. The house was dark when I heard them come home late laughing about something. I heard them tell the babysitter thank you. Heard their footsteps on the stairs, the water running in their bathroom. Normal sounds of a normal life that didn't include me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in that gray room and made a decision. I couldn't control how my son saw me. I couldn't make Madison like me or make the kids care about me. But I could control how I saw myself. And I was tired of seeing a burden, a victim, a woman who'd given up. The next morning, I was up before dawn again. But this time, instead of sitting quietly in the kitchen, I grabbed my laptop, the old one Marcus had given me 3 years ago. I made coffee strong and black and I started researching. Jobs for older workers. Skills training. Online courses. Housing assistance. Social security benefits. Volunteer opportunities. I clicked through link after link, reading everything I could find. And slowly, very slowly, a plan started to form. I'd worked in food service. I'd worked in healthcare. I worked in retail. None of those jobs had been glamorous, but I'd been good at them. I was reliable, hardworking, organized. I might be 62, but I wasn't dead. And I sure as hell wasn't useless. By the time the family came down for breakfast, I had a notebook full of ideas and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. "Morning," I said, and my voice was different, stronger. Ethan wouldn't meet my eyes. Madison gave me a careful smile. The kids ignored me as usual. "Ethan, can we talk later?" I asked. "After work." He looked surprised. Sure, Mom. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said. And I meant it. That day, while they were all gone, I made phone calls. I contacted a job placement agency that specialized in older workers. I filled out applications online. I looked at apartments, small and cheap but available. I researched roommate situations, senior housing, anything that might work. I even called a few old friends from my diner days, women I'd lost touch with over the years, and reconnected. One of those friends, Louise, a woman I'd worked with for nearly a decade before James died, was a manager at a call center now. "Diane Marshall. Lord, girl. I haven't heard from you in ages. How are you?" I told her everything. The whole messy truth. And she listened, really listened, the way only old friends can. "Well," she said when I finished. "First thing, you're not useless. Don't let anyone, even your own kid, tell you that. Second thing, you still good with people. Still got that charm that could turn a grumpy trucker into a big tipper." I laughed, surprising myself. "I think so. Then come work with me. We need customer service reps, and honestly, we prefer hiring mature workers. You're reliable, you show up. You know how to deal with difficult people without losing your cool. It's 40 hours a week, benefits after 90 days, and the pay's decent. Not great, but decent. You could probably afford a small place with that." "Louise, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll come in for an interview. Tomorrow if you can." I said yes. Of course I said yes. When Ethan came home that evening, I was waiting in the living room. Not the kitchen, not my room. The living room, sitting on the couch like I had every right to be there. "Hey, Mom. You wanted to talk." "Yes. Sit down, please." He sat looking nervous. Madison hovered in the doorway. "I want to thank you," I started, and he looked confused. "Thank you for taking me in when I needed help. Thank you for giving me a place to stay. I know it hasn't been easy." "Mom, about what I said yesterday." "Let me finish." My voice was firm, not angry, just firm. "What you said yesterday hurt. It hurt a lot. But it also woke me up. You were right about some things. I haven't been taking control of my own life. I've been floating, waiting for someone else to save me, to make me feel valuable. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me." Ethan was quiet now, listening. "So I'm making some changes. I have a job interview tomorrow. If I get it, and I think I will, I'll start looking for my own place. It won't be anything fancy, but it'll be mine. I'll be out of your hair within a few months." "Mom, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You were right. I'm a guest here, and I've overstayed my welcome. But Ethan, I want you to understand something." I leaned forward, catching his eyes, making sure he heard every word. "I am not useless. I raised you and your brother. I worked myself to the bone to give you opportunities. I loved you with everything I had. The fact that I'm struggling now doesn't erase everything I've done, everything I am." His face crumpled a little. "I know, Mom. I'm sorry. I was stressed and I said something horrible. I didn't mean." "Maybe you did mean it. I said gently. Maybe that's how you see me now. And that's okay. But it's not how I see myself. Not anymore. Madison spoke from the doorway. Diane, you don't have to leave. We can work something out. I think I do have to leave, I said. For all of us. But thank you. The interview with Louise went well. Better than well. I started the following Monday, training for 2 weeks before taking calls. The work was exactly what I needed, structured, challenging enough to keep me engaged, but not so demanding that I felt overwhelmed. I talked to people all day, helping them solve problems, answering questions, sometimes just listening when they needed someone to hear them. It turned out that all those years of waitressing, of reading people and making them feel seen, had prepared me perfectly for this. My first paycheck was small after taxes, but it was mine. I'd earned it. I deposited it and started a new savings account, one with a goal. First month's rent and security deposit on my own place. At home things were different. I was gone all day now, working 8 to 5 like everyone else. I contributed to groceries with my earnings. I stayed in my room in the evenings, not isolating but respecting boundaries. And something strange happened. Ethan started seeking me out. How was work, Mom? He'd ask at dinner, which I now sometimes attended because I was invited, not because I was hovering. Good, I'd say. Helped a woman recover her account today. She was so grateful she almost cried. That's nice, he'd say, and he'd sound like he meant it. But I wasn't doing this for him anymore. I was doing it for me. 3 months in, I found an apartment. It was small, a 1-bedroom in an older building, nothing like Ethan's house. But it had hardwood floors and big windows, and it was in a neighborhood full of life. Coffee shops, bookstores, a park where people walked their dogs. The rent was exactly what I could afford with a little left over. I found a place. I told Ethan and Madison over dinner one night. I'll be moving out at the end of the month. Riley, who'd been quiet all evening, looked up. You're leaving, Grandma? It was the most interest she'd shown in me since I'd arrived. Yes, sweetie. I'm getting my own apartment. But why? Connor asked. Don't you like living here? I chose my words carefully. I love being near you all. But grown-ups need their own space. And I'm excited to have a place that's all mine. Madison looked relieved. Ethan looked guilty. But I felt free. Moving day was a Saturday in July. Marcus flew in to help, bringing his oldest son Tyler with him. It was good to see them, to feel Marcus's strong hug, to laugh with him as we packed my few belongings. You doing okay, Mom? He asked quietly as we loaded boxes into the U-Haul he'd rented. I'm better than okay, I told him honestly. I'm finding myself again. Ethan helped too, which surprised me. He carried boxes, assembled furniture, made jokes that fell a little flat but showed he was trying. When we were done, when my new little apartment was full of my old furniture and new possibilities, he stood in the doorway looking around. It's nice, Mom, he said. Small but nice. It's perfect, I replied. He shifted his weight, uncomfortable. I'm sorry. For what I said. For making you feel unwelcome. I know you are. I don't think you're useless. I was overwhelmed and I took it out on you. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't, I agreed. But maybe I needed to hear something hard to wake me up. So in a way, you did me a favor. He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just hugged me, and I let him, but I didn't cling. I was learning not to cling. After they all left, after Marcus and Tyler flew back to Seattle, after Ethan drove back to his big house in the suburbs, I stood in my little apartment and breathed. Just breathed. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I spent the next few months building a life. Not a life in the margins of someone else's story, but my own story. I decorated my apartment with photos and colors, and things that made me happy. I joined a book club at the library. I started volunteering at a food bank on weekends, using my old skills to help organize their kitchen. I made friends, real friends, people who valued me for who I was now, not who I'd been to someone else. At work I excelled. By month 4, I was one of the top performers in my training group. By month 6, I was helping train new hires. By month 8, Louise pulled me aside. Corporate's looking for a team lead, she said. Someone to manage a small group of customer service reps, provide coaching, handle escalations. It's more money, better benefits. I recommended you. Louise, I've only been here 8 months. And you're already better than people who've been here for years. You've got the experience, the skills, the temperament. Plus, you actually care about doing good work, which is rarer than you'd think. Interviews next week if you're interested. I got the job. Team lead, managing 6 people, helping them develop their skills, solving complex customer problems. The pay increase meant I could breathe a little easier, start saving for real, maybe even plan for things I'd stop letting myself dream about. Do you think my decision was right or wrong? Tell me in the comments. Because what happened next, nobody could have predicted. It was a cold day in November, nearly a year after I'd moved out of Ethan's house, when my phone rang with an unknown number. Is this Diane Marshall? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes. Ms. Marshall, my name is Patricia Chan, and I'm with Henderson Business Solutions. Your name came up in our search for an operations consultant. Would you have time to discuss an opportunity? I almost laughed. I think you have the wrong person. I work in customer service. I'm looking at your profile right now. 25 years in food service management, healthcare operations, retail logistics. Consistently excellent performance reviews. Recently transitioned to customer service and achieved team lead within 8 months. That's exactly the kind of adaptable, people-focused experience we're looking for. Someone had posted my work history online. Louise probably, or maybe someone from the job placement agency. Either way, Patricia Chan wanted to meet with me about consulting work, helping businesses improve their customer service operations, training programs, and employee management. The pay is contract-based, she explained. We typically start consultants at $75 per hour, with potential for long-term partnerships if the fit is good. $75 per hour. I'd been making $17 at the call center. I took the meeting. Why not? The worst they could do was decide I wasn't right for it. But they didn't decide that. Patricia and her partner, a man named Tom Henderson, saw something in me that I was just beginning to see in myself. They saw someone who'd survived, adapted, learned, and refused to give up. They saw someone who understood people, who could walk into chaos and create order, who could train and coach and lead without ego or drama. The work is challenging, Patricia warned. You'd be going into struggling businesses, dealing with frustrated owners, resistant employees, systemic problems. It's not glamorous. I thought about my life. 3 jobs after James died. Raising 2 boys alone. Rebuilding myself at 63. I think I can handle it, I said. They started me with small projects. A restaurant that couldn't keep staff. A medical office with terrible patient satisfaction scores. A retail store hemorrhaging money due to theft and inefficiency. I went in, observed, talked to people, identified problems, created solutions. And it worked. Not overnight, not magically, but it worked. The restaurant stabilized. The medical office improved. The retail store stopped bleeding. Word spread. 6 months into consulting, I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. Not wealthy, not by Ethan's standards, but comfortable. Secure. I moved to a nicer apartment, bought a reliable car, started a real retirement fund. And I changed. Not just financially, but fundamentally. I walked differently. Talked differently. I looked people in the eye. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. I'd see Ethan and his family every few weeks. Sunday dinners that were pleasant but not required. Riley and Connor were more interested in me now that I had stories to tell, experiences to share. Madison was warmer, though I suspected it had more to do with my no longer needing anything from them than any real change of heart. But Ethan watched me with something like confusion. Like he couldn't quite reconcile this version of his mother with the woman who'd sat crying in his kitchen 18 months ago. You seem different, Mom, he said one Sunday as we cleaned up after dinner. I am different, I agreed. Happier. Much happier. He was quiet for a moment, loading the dishwasher. I'm proud of you. I know I wasn't supportive when you needed me. But I'm proud of what you've built. Thank you, I said, and I meant it. But I didn't need his pride anymore. That was the real difference. Then came the day that changed everything again. I was at the office Patricia and Tom had given me. A small space in a shared building, reviewing a proposal for a new client when my phone rang. Ethan's number. Hey honey, what's up? Mom, I need your help. His voice was strained, urgent. Not like money help. Professional help. My business is in trouble. I sat very still, my pen hovering over the proposal I'd been reviewing. Ethan never asked for help. Especially not from me. What kind of trouble? I asked carefully. Can we meet? Today if possible. I don't want to do this over the phone. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from my son in a coffee shop near his office. He looked terrible, honestly, dark circles under his eyes, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his tie loosened like he'd been pulling at it all day. This wasn't the confident, successful man who'd called me useless. This was someone who was drowning. Talk to me, I said gently. He rubbed his face with both hands. I'm losing clients. Big ones. My biggest client just left last week, and 2 others are threatening to follow. The firm that I built, that I've poured everything into for 10 years, it's falling apart. Why are they leaving? They say the service isn't what it used to be. That we're not responsive, not innovative, not worth what we're charging. One of them told me my staff seems miserable and unmotivated, and that energy bleeds into everything we deliver. I sipped my coffee thinking, are they right? He looked at me, surprised by the directness. Yeah, they're probably right. I've been so focused on growth, on revenue, on expanding, that I stopped paying attention to the people doing the actual work. Half my staff is burnt out. The other half is just going through the motions. And I don't know how to fix it. Why come to me? I asked not unkindly. You have business partners, advisors, consultants you've worked with before. Because, he said, and his voice cracked just a little, I've been watching what you do. I've seen the way you turned your whole life around. Louise told Madison you're one of the best consultants her company has ever worked with. And I thought maybe if you could transform yourself like that, maybe you could help me figure out how to transform my business. There it was. The admission that maybe, just maybe, his old and useless mother had something valuable to offer after all. Tell me about your staff, I said. How many people? 23. Mix of analysts, project managers, account executives. Good people mostly. Smart, educated. But the culture has gone toxic. People don't talk to each other. They hoard information, protect their territories, undermine each other. And it starts at the top with me and my 2 partners, Derek and Paul. We barely communicate anymore except to argue about money. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I'd been using for client notes. When was the last time you had a real conversation with your staff? Not a meeting about metrics, but a conversation about how they're doing, what they need, what's working and what isn't. He thought about it. I don't know. A year? Maybe longer. When was the last time you recognized someone's good work? Not with a bonus, but with actual acknowledgement, gratitude, respect. His silence was answer enough. Ethan, I said, and I made him look at me. You can't treat people like machines. They're not algorithms that run on code. They're human beings with feelings, needs, lives outside your office. If you've forgotten that, then yeah, your business is going to fail. Not because you're bad at strategy or analysis, but because you've forgotten the most important part of any business, the people who make it run. He nodded slowly. That's what I need help with. The people part. Will you take me on as a client? I should have felt triumphant. I should have savored this moment, my son coming to me, admitting he needed my expertise, my help. But mostly what I felt was sadness. Sadness that he'd had to lose so much before he could see what mattered. I'll need to assess the situation first, I said, slipping into professional mode. Interview your staff, review your processes, observe your operations. It'll take about a week of intensive work. Then I'll give you a proposal for what needs to change and what it'll cost. Whatever it costs, Mom, I'll pay it. This isn't me helping you as your mother, Ethan. This is me doing my job as a consultant. You'll get my professional rate, the same as any other client. And you'll have to follow my recommendations, even when they're hard to hear. Especially when they're hard to hear. Can you do that? He nodded. Yes, absolutely. Then send me your staff roster, organizational chart, and client feedback from the past 6 months. I'll start Monday. We parted ways and I drove back to my apartment with my mind racing. This was risky. Consulting for family was always complicated. But this was also an opportunity not just for Ethan but for me to prove once and for all that I knew what I was talking about. That weekend, I reviewed everything Ethan sent me. The picture was worse than I'd thought. Staff turnover was at 40%. Client satisfaction scores had dropped by 30 points in 18 months. Revenue was down, expenses were up, and morale was in the basement. 3 people had filed HR complaints in the past year, and one was threatening a lawsuit for hostile work environment. Monday morning, I arrived at Ethan's office at 8 a.m. sharp, dressed in professional clothes I'd invested in over the past year. A navy blazer, gray slacks, comfortable but polished shoes. I looked the part because I was the part. Diane Marshall, consultant, here to do a job. Ethan gathered his staff in the conference room to introduce me. 23 faces, mostly younger than my children, looked at me with varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and exhaustion. This is Diane Marshall, Ethan said. She's a consultant specializing in operational efficiency and workplace culture. She'll be conducting assessments this week and making recommendations. I expect everyone to cooperate fully. Diane, they're all yours. I stood at the front of the room and smiled. Good morning. I know some of you are wondering who I am and why I'm here. Fair enough. I'm here because this company is struggling, and my job is to figure out why and help fix it. Over the next week, I'll be talking to each of you individually, observing how you work, and looking at your processes. This isn't about finding someone to blame or getting anyone fired. This is about making this a better place to work and deliver better results for your clients. All I ask is that you're honest with me. I can't help if I don't know the truth. The individual interviews started that afternoon. I set up in a small office, and one by one, Ethan's staff came to talk to me. And talk they did. Once they realized I was genuinely listening, that I wasn't going to run to Ethan with everything they said, they opened up. Jennifer, a project manager in her 30s, told me she was looking for another job because she was tired of working 70-hour weeks with no recognition. I love the work, she said, but I have 2 kids at home I never see. And when I tried to talk to Ethan about flexibility, he basically told me if I couldn't handle the workload, maybe this wasn't the right place for me. Marcus, no relation to my son but confusingly sharing his name, was an analyst fresh out of grad school. The partners don't talk to us except to criticize. I've never once heard good job or thank you for the 80-hour week I just pulled. It's always this isn't good enough or the client needs more. I'm burnt out and I've only been here 8 months. Sarah, an account executive, described a culture of backstabbing and information hoarding. Nobody shares knowledge because knowledge is power here. If you help someone else succeed, it might make you look less valuable. So we all protect what we know and watch each other fail. It's exhausting. The stories went on and on. Overwork. No work-life balance. No appreciation. Poor communication. Unclear expectations. Favoritism. The 3 partners, Ethan, Derek, and Paul, operating like separate fiefdoms instead of a unified leadership team. By Wednesday, I had a clear picture. The problem wasn't the staff. The staff was talented, hardworking, and deeply demoralized. The problem was leadership. The problem was Ethan. Thursday, I interviewed the partners together. Derek was defensive from the start. Paul was checked out, barely participating. Ethan was tense, clearly worried about what I'd found. Tell me about your leadership philosophy, I said. Derek jumped in. We set high standards and expect people to meet them. This is a competitive industry. If people can't handle it, they can work somewhere else. And how's that working out for you? I asked mildly. What's that supposed to mean? Derek's face reddened. It means you've lost 40% of your staff in 18 months, your client satisfaction is plummeting, and you're on track to lose your 3 biggest accounts. So clearly, something isn't working. Paul spoke for the first time. She's right, Derek. We're failing. We're not failing, we're just going through a rough patch. You're failing, I said firmly. And it's not because your staff is incompetent. It's because you've created a culture where people are afraid to communicate, afraid to ask for help, afraid to admit when they're overwhelmed. You've prioritized metrics over people, and people are what make businesses work. Derek stood up. I don't have to listen to this. You do if you want to save your company, I replied, not backing down. Sit down, Derek. He sat, shocked perhaps by being spoken to so directly. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. I'm going to write a report with specific recommendations. Some of them you'll like. Most of them you won't. But if you want to turn this around, you'll implement every single one. If you're not willing to do that, then you're wasting my time and your money, and you might as well start bankruptcy proceedings now. The room was silent. Then Ethan spoke. We'll do it. Whatever you recommend, we'll do it. Friday I presented my findings. Ethan, Derek, Paul, and their HR director sat around the conference table while I laid it out point by point. First, leadership restructuring. The three of you need executive coaching on communication and collaboration. You're not a team, you're three separate dictators. That ends now. Second, workload assessment and redistribution. Your staff is drowning. You need to hire at least 3 more people, and you need to implement realistic timelines and expectations. Third, culture change. Starting next week, you're implementing weekly one-on-ones where you actually listen to your staff. You're creating transparent communication channels. You're recognizing good work publicly. You're showing appreciation and respect. Fourth, work-life balance policies. Flexibility for parents, mental health days, clear boundaries around after-hours communication. Your people need to have lives outside this office. Fifth, professional development. You're investing in your staff's growth, training, career paths. People leave when they don't see a future. Give them a future. I continued for another 30 minutes, covering everything from meeting efficiency to client relationship management to the physical workspace, which was depressing and windowless. When I finished, Derek was shaking his head. This is going to cost a fortune. Less than replacing your entire staff and starting over, I replied. Less than losing all your clients and going under. This is an investment in survival. Paul was nodding. When can we start? Today, I said. Right now. The 3 of you are going to walk out to that staff area and tell everyone what's changing. And then you're going to mean it. Ethan looked at me with something like awe. You're sure this will work? If you commit to it, yes. If you have to do it or give up when it gets hard, no. Change is uncomfortable. Leadership is uncomfortable. But it's necessary. They did it. They walked out and addressed the staff with more honesty than they'd shown in years. They admitted mistakes, acknowledged the toll it had taken, and outlined the changes coming. The staff was cautiously optimistic, which was better than I'd hoped for. My official assessment was complete, but Ethan asked me to stay on as an ongoing consultant, helping implement the changes and coaching leadership through the transition. I agreed with clear boundaries. This was professional, not personal. I had other clients, other commitments. I would come in 2 days a week for 3 months, then reassess. The first month was brutal. Derek fought me on everything. Paul was supportive but passive. Ethan was trying, genuinely trying, but he had to unlearn 10 years of bad habits. Staff was skeptical that anything would really change. But slowly, incrementally, it did change. The new hires took pressure off overworked staff. The one-on-ones created space for real conversations. Recognition programs boosted morale. Professional development gave people hope. The office got a makeover, windows that let in natural light, plants, a break room that wasn't depressing. And the results started showing. Productivity increased because people weren't burnt out. Quality improved because people cared again. Client feedback got better. One of the clients threatening to leave decided to stay. Then another. By month 2, Derek pulled me aside. I owe you an apology. I thought this was touchy-feely nonsense. But it's working. It's not magic, I said. It's just treating people like human beings. By month 3, the company had turned a corner. Not completely fixed, still plenty of work to do, but stable. Growing. Healthy. Ethan asked me to extend the contract. I don't think we're ready to do this without you yet. You are, I assured him. But I'll stay on for 1 more month part-time just to make sure the systems hold. It was during that 4th month that something unexpected happened. I was in the conference room coaching Jennifer through a difficult client situation when Derek knocked on the door. Sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here asking for Diane. Says his name is Robert Chen, and he's interested in consulting services. Robert Chen turned out to be Patricia Chen's husband, and he owned a chain of medical clinics that was expanding too fast and struggling with exactly the kind of operational chaos I'd helped Ethan fix. He'd heard about my work from Patricia, who'd heard about it from Tom, who'd heard about it from someone at Ethan's company. Word was spreading. I need someone who understands people, not just processes, Robert said. Patricia says you're the best she's ever worked with. Can you take on another client? I could. I did. And then another. And another. By summer, nearly 2 years after Ethan had called me old and useless, I had my own consulting practice with 6 regular clients, a waiting list, and more work than I could handle. I hired an assistant, a sharp young woman named Kayla who reminded me of myself at her age, hungry, hardworking, eager to learn. I moved into a better apartment, this one with 2 bedrooms so Marcus and his family could visit. I bought nice furniture, art for the walls, a good coffee maker. I traveled for work, stayed in nice hotels, ate in restaurants where I didn't have to check the prices first. But more than the money or the success, what changed was how I felt. I woke up excited about my day. I went to bed satisfied that I'd made a difference. I looked in the mirror and saw someone strong, capable, valuable. Not despite my age, but because of everything my age represented. Decades of experience, wisdom earned through struggle, resilience that couldn't be taught. If you like this story, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to get more stories from me. Because what happened next, well, you need to hear this. It was a crisp October evening when my phone rang with Ethan's number. But when I answered, it wasn't Ethan. It was Riley, my granddaughter, and she was crying. "Grandma? Can you come over? Please." I was there in 20 minutes, my heart pounding. Riley met me at the door, tears streaming down her face, and threw herself into my arms. "What happened, sweetheart? Where's your mom and dad?" "They're fighting," she sobbed. "They've been fighting all week. Dad's stressed about work and Mom's mad because he's never home and they're yelling and I hate it, Grandma, I hate it." I held her close, rubbing her back the way I'd done when Ethan was small and had nightmares. "It's okay, baby. It's going to be okay." Connor appeared at the top of the stairs, trying to look brave but clearly scared. "Grandma, can we come stay with you tonight?" I looked past them to where I could hear raised voices, Madison and Ethan tearing into each other with the kind of viciousness that comes from years of unspoken resentments finally exploding. "Yes," I said firmly. "Go pack a bag, both of you. You're staying with me." They ran upstairs and I walked toward the voices. Ethan and Madison were in the kitchen, facing off like boxers, both of them red-faced and furious. "Never here, Ethan. You're always at the office, always at client dinners, always putting work first." "I'm trying to save the company, Madison. I'm trying to provide for this family. We don't need more money, we need you. The kids need you. But you're so obsessed with being successful that you've forgotten why success matters." "Excuse me," I said loudly, and they both spun to face me. "Your children are terrified. They're upstairs packing bags to come stay with me because they can't stand to be in this house right now. So whatever you two are fighting about, pause it. For them." Madison's face crumpled. Ethan looked stricken. "They called you." Madison whispered. "Riley did." Crying so hard she could barely speak. "You two want to destroy each other, that's your choice. But don't do it in front of those kids." I collected Riley and Connor, who had backpacks full of clothes and stuffed animals, and drove them to my apartment. I made them dinner, set them up in my guest room with sleeping bags like it was an adventure, and let them watch movies until they fell asleep. Then I sat in my living room and waited. The call came around 11. "Mom." Ethan's voice was raw. "Are the kids okay?" "They're fine. Asleep. Can I come get them?" "Not tonight. Let them sleep. You and Madison need to talk, really talk, without an audience. I don't know if there's anything left to say." "Then you need to figure that out." "Ethan, what's going on?" "The company's doing well now. You hired more staff, you're implementing the systems, the clients are happy. So what's this about?" He was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how to turn it off, Mom. The stress, the pressure, the need to prove myself. Even when things are going well, I'm waiting for it all to fall apart. So I keep working, keep pushing, keep trying to stay ahead of disaster." And Madison's right. I've missed Riley's violin recitals, Connor's soccer games, date nights, family dinners. I've missed everything that matters because I'm so afraid of failing. "You're failing right now," I said gently. "You're failing your wife and your children. And honey, you're failing yourself. I don't know how to stop." "You do. You absolutely do. You've watched me transform my entire life in 2 years. You've learned how to be a better leader, a better boss. Now you need to learn how to be a better husband and father. And that starts with being present. Will you help me?" Not as a consultant, but as my mom. Of course, I said. But Ethan, you have to do the work. I can guide you, but you have to make the changes. The next morning, I made Riley and Connor pancakes and drove them to school myself. Then I came back to my apartment and called Madison. How are you? I asked. She laughed bitterly. How do you think? My marriage is falling apart, my kids ran away to their grandmother's, and I don't know how we got here. Can I come by? I think we should talk. An hour later, I was sitting in Madison's pristine living room, the same room where I'd once felt like an intruder, but now I was here as someone with something to offer. I know we haven't always had the easiest relationship, I started. When I lived here, I felt like a burden, and you probably felt like I was invading your space. We were both right in a way. Madison nodded, tears welling up. I'm sorry for how I treated you, Diane. I was protective of my family, my home, and I saw you as a threat somehow. Like you were going to judge me or take over or I don't know. I was wrong. You weren't all wrong. I was lost back then, looking for purpose in all the wrong places. But Madison, can I tell you something I've learned? Marriage is hard. Raising kids is hard. Building a life is hard. And when one person, usually the woman, is carrying all the emotional labor while the other person, usually the man, is obsessed with work, it creates resentment that festers. That's exactly what's happening, she whispered. I'm drowning in managing the house, the kids, the schedules, the emotional needs. And Ethan comes home and thinks he's done his part because he made money. But money doesn't pack lunches or help with homework or notice when Riley's feeling insecure or Connor's being bullied. Have you told him this? Really told him, not in anger, but in a way he can hear. I don't think he can hear it. He's too wrapped up in his own stress. He can hear it. Trust me. But you both need help working through this. Have you considered counseling? She shook her head. Ethan thinks therapy is for broken people. I smiled. Ethan used to think a lot of things. Then he watched his old, useless mother become a successful consultant. People can change when they're ready. That evening, I had both Ethan and Madison over to my apartment, the kids at a friend's house for a playdate. I sat them down on my couch, made them tea, and facilitated the most honest conversation they'd had in years. Madison, tell Ethan what you need from him. She did. Everything. The anger, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the feeling of being invisible. Ethan, tell Madison what you're afraid of. He did. The fear of failure, of not being enough, of letting everyone down, of becoming irrelevant like he'd once made me feel. They cried. They yelled a little. But mostly they listened to each other for the first time in a long time. I don't want to lose you, Ethan said finally. I don't want to lose my family. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. It's not about one big gesture, Madison said. It's about showing up. Every day. Being present. Choosing us. I can do that, he said. I want to do that. They started therapy the following week. Ethan cut back his hours, delegated more, trusted his staff to handle things without him hovering. He made Riley's next recital and Connor's soccer game and family dinner 3 nights a week. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. It was real effort. And through it all, I watched my son learn the same lesson I'd learned. That success means nothing if you've lost yourself in the pursuit of it. One evening in late November, Ethan called me with an unexpected request. Mom, can you come to the office tomorrow? All 3 partners want to talk to you. The next day, I walked into that conference room where I'd once presented my scathing assessment. Derek, Paul, and Ethan stood when I entered, which was unusual. Diane, we have a proposal, Derek said, and he looked nervous, which was even more unusual. The company's growing. We're taking on bigger clients, more complex projects. We need someone to oversee operations, culture, training, all the people stuff that we clearly aren't great at. We want to offer you a position, Paul continued. Director of Operations. Full-time, salary, equity, the works. Ethan spoke last. We need you, Mom. Not as a consultant we hire when things go wrong, but as part of the leadership team. Permanently. We're willing to pay top of market, whatever it takes. I looked at the 3 of them, these men who'd learned hard lessons about leadership and humility. I'm honored, I said. Truly. But I have to decline. They looked stunned. Why? Ethan asked. Because I've built something of my own. My consulting practice, my client relationships, my reputation. I'm not looking to be someone's employee again, even with a fancy title. I've finally learned what it means to work for myself, to build something that's mine. I'm not giving that up. But we need you, Derek said. You don't need me, I corrected gently. You've learned the principles. You've built the systems. You have good people now. Trust them. Trust yourselves. And if you need advice, you know where to find me. They were disappointed, but they understood. Or at least Ethan did. As I was leaving, he walked me to my car. I'm proud of you, Mom. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for knowing your worth and not settling. I learned from experience, I said. Sometimes you have to lose everything to figure out what really matters. Yeah, he said quietly. Yeah, you do. The holidays that year were different. Instead of me trying to fit into their family, we blended. Christmas dinner was at my apartment, cozy and warm, everyone contributing something. I made the pot roast I'd once cooked in Madison's kitchen, the one that had led to that terrible fight. But this time, everyone ate it and asked for seconds and told stories and laughed. Connor asked about my work, genuinely curious about what a consultant does. Riley showed me her latest violin piece, and I listened attentively. Madison talked about going back to school, maybe getting a degree in interior design, and I encouraged her. Ethan was present, fully present, not checking his phone or thinking about work. Grandma, Riley said as we cleaned up, you're like really successful now, aren't you? I do okay, I said modestly. Connor and I heard Dad call you boss the other day. Like he was asking your advice about something and he said, whatever you think, boss. Why does he call you that? I glanced at Ethan, who had the grace to look embarrassed. It's just a nickname, sweetie. But it wasn't just a nickname. It was recognition, respect, acknowledgement that I knew what I was talking about, that my experience and expertise were valuable, that I was someone worth listening to. Later, after everyone had gone home, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the debris of a good day. Wrapping paper, empty plates, the warm smell of cinnamon and pine. I thought about where I'd been 2 years ago, crying in a gray room believing I was old and useless. And I thought about where I was now, 64 years old, running a successful consulting practice, respected in my field, financially stable, emotionally strong. Not because someone rescued me, but because I rescued myself. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Thanks for hosting, Mom. Best Christmas in years. Love you. Boss's favorite son. I laughed out loud. Boss. Who would have thought? The months that followed brought more changes, all of them good. My consulting practice continued to grow. I hired 2 more assistants and brought on a junior consultant, mentoring her the way Louise had mentored me. I started speaking at business conferences about organizational culture and leadership. I wrote articles for professional journals. I became someone people sought out, not someone they tolerated. Marcus came to visit in March with his whole family, and we spent a week exploring the city, going to museums, eating good food, just being together. He pulled me aside one evening and said, Mom, I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. When you were struggling, I should have. Marcus, you were building your own life. That's what you're supposed to do. And honestly, I needed to figure this out on my own. If you'd rescued me, I would have just transferred my dependence from Ethan to you. I needed to learn to stand on my own. Well, you're standing pretty tall now, he said, grinning. Taller than both your sons, if we're being honest. In April, I got a call from a national business magazine. They were doing a feature on second act careers, people who'd reinvented themselves later in life. They wanted to interview me, feature my story. I don't know, I told the reporter. My story's pretty ordinary. That's exactly why we want to tell it, she replied. Most people think that if you haven't made it by 40, you never will. You prove that's not true. You prove it's never too late to start over. The article came out in June, a glossy spread with professional photos and quotes from my clients, including Ethan. My mother taught me that leadership isn't about dominance or control, he was quoted as saying. It's about empathy, communication, and genuinely caring about people. She saved my business, but more importantly, she showed me how to be a better person. Reading those words, I finally let go of the last bit of hurt from that day in the kitchen when he called me useless. He'd been wrong. We'd both learned that. But more than that, we'd both grown. The article brought even more business. I was booked solid for months, turning down clients, raising my rates, being selective about who I worked with. I had the luxury of choosing projects that mattered, that challenged me, that let me make a real difference. In August, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I bought a small house. Nothing like Ethan's mansion, just a cozy 3-bedroom cottage with a garden and a porch swing. I furnished it exactly how I wanted, with color and personality in life. The first dinner I hosted there, both my sons and their families came. We cooked together, the kids running around the yard, the adults laughing in the kitchen. Madison brought wine and complimented my decorating. Vanessa, Marcus's wife, taught me how to use Instagram to showcase my work. As the sun set and we sat on the porch watching the kids catch fireflies, Ethan leaned over and said quietly, "This is what success looks like, isn't it? Not the big house or the expensive car. This. Family. Peace. Purpose. Took you long enough to figure that out," I teased, and he laughed. "I'm a slow learner, but I have a good teacher." "Hey boss," Derek called from inside, where he and Paul had somehow ended up at my dinner party. "We need a ruling. Paul says pistachio ice cream is superior to chocolate, and he's clearly insane." "Boss?" Madison asked, raising an eyebrow. "Long story," Ethan said, grinning. But it wasn't a long story. It was actually quite simple. I'd spent most of my life being what other people needed me to be. Wife, mother, worker, caretaker. I derived my worth from how well I served others, how little space I took up, how useful I could be. Then I'd been told I was useless, and that had broken something fundamental in me. But from that breaking came a rebuilding, a chance to define myself on my own terms. Not as someone's mother or someone's employee or someone's burden, but as Diane Marshall, consultant, leader, woman who transformed her life through sheer determination and refusal to give up. The boss nickname that had started as Ethan asking my advice, then evolved into him calling me that affectionately in front of his staff, then spread to his partners and clients, wasn't really about authority. It was about respect, recognition, the acknowledgement that I had wisdom worth listening to, experience worth valuing, and strength that had only grown with age. As autumn arrived and my 65th birthday approached, I found myself reflecting on the journey. 2.5 years since that devastating day in the kitchen. 2.5 years of transformation so complete that sometimes I barely recognized the woman I'd been. For my birthday, I didn't want a party. Instead, I took a week off and traveled to Italy, something I'd always dreamed of but never thought possible. I walked through ancient ruins and ate amazing food and sat in piazzas drinking wine and feeling completely, utterly content. On the flight home, I drafted an email to my mailing list, something I'd been thinking about for weeks. A message about second chances, about resilience, about never accepting someone else's limited assessment of your worth. "Don't let anyone tell you you're too old, too late, too anything," I wrote. I was 62 when I started over. 62 when I learned I was capable of more than I'd ever imagined. If I can do it, anyone can. The only person who gets to decide your value is you. The responses poured in. Hundreds of people, mostly women my age or older, telling me their own stories of reinvention, of refusing to disappear, of claiming power they'd always had but never used. I realized I'd accidentally stumbled into something bigger than just helping businesses improve their operations. I was part of a movement of older adults refusing to be sidelined, insisting on their relevance, and proving that experience and age were assets, not liabilities. Do you think my decision to start over was right? Tell me in the comments because the story isn't over yet. In October, Ethan's company won a major industry award for workplace culture transformation. They invited me to the ceremony as a special guest, and when they accepted the award, all 3 partners called me up on stage. "None of this would have been possible without Diane Marshall," Derek said into the microphone. "She came in when we were failing and taught us that business success isn't just about profit margins and growth metrics. It's about people. She showed us how to lead with empathy, communicate with honesty, and build a culture where everyone can thrive. Diane, would you say a few words?" I hadn't prepared anything, but I took the microphone and spoke from the heart. 2 years ago, I was at the lowest point of my life. I felt invisible, useless, like my best years were behind me. But I learned something important. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to discover who you really are. And it's never too late to build something meaningful. To everyone here who's struggling, who feels like they've missed their chance, who thinks they're too old or too late or too anything, you're not. Your story isn't over. Mine certainly wasn't. The applause was deafening. As I walked off stage, I saw Riley and Connor in the audience, clapping hard, looking at their grandmother with something like awe. That meant more than any award. The months rolled on, each one bringing new opportunities, new challenges, new growth. I started teaching workshops on leadership and organizational culture. I wrote a book proposal about workplace transformation, and 3 publishers expressed interest. I was asked to serve on advisory boards for nonprofits focusing on employment for older workers. My life was full, rich, purposeful. Not because I was trying to prove anything to Ethan or Madison or anyone else, but because I'd finally figured out what I was meant to do. I was meant to help people, individuals and organizations, become the best versions of themselves. And through it all, my relationship with Ethan deepened. Not as dependent mother and reluctant son, but as 2 adults who respected each other, learned from each other, and genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We had lunch once a week, talking about business challenges, family dynamics, life lessons. He asked my advice on everything from client relationships to parenting decisions. And sometimes I asked his advice too, because respect flows both ways. "Boss," he said one day over lunch, "I need to ask you something." "Stop calling me that," I said automatically, though I'd given up trying to actually make him stop. "How did you do it? How did you go from rock bottom to this? Sometimes I watch you and I can't believe you're the same person who lived in our back room crying every night." "I didn't think you knew about the crying," I said softly. "I knew. I just didn't know how to help. Or maybe I didn't want to deal with it. I'm not proud of that. You were dealing with your own stuff. And honestly, you helped by being brutal enough to wake me up. If you'd been gentle and kind and accommodating, I probably would have stayed comfortable in my misery. You forced me to change. That's generous of you to say, but we both know I was a jerk." "You were," I agreed, and he laughed. "But people can be jerks and still catalyze important change. The key is learning from it." "Have I learned from it?" I looked at my son, really looked at him. The man who'd called me useless now sought my counsel on his biggest decisions. The man who'd wanted me gone now made sure I was included in every family event. The man who'd forgotten how to see people had become a leader known for empathy and emotional intelligence. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I think you have." As we approach the end of this story, I want to tell you something important. My transformation wasn't about revenge or proving Ethan wrong. It was about proving myself right, right that I had value, right that I had potential, right that my life wasn't over just because I'd hit a rough patch. The title of this story says, my son said, "You're just old and useless." Now he calls me boss. But the real story isn't about what Ethan calls me. It's about what I call myself. And these days I call myself successful, capable, valuable, strong. I'm 65 now, and I'm just getting started. My consulting practice continues to grow. My book is being published next spring. I'm being invited to speak at conferences around the country. I have financial security, professional respect, and personal peace. But more than any of that, I have myself back. The woman who got lost in decades of serving others, who forgot she was more than wife and mother and worker, who believed she was used up and finished, that woman found her way home. To herself. If you've ever felt invisible, know that it's never too late to take your power back. If you've ever been told you're too old, too late, too anything, know that those are lies. The only timeline that matters is yours. The only opinion that defines you is yours. My journey from that gray room to this full, vibrant life wasn't easy. It required courage I didn't know I had, strength I had to develop, and faith in myself when no one else had faith in me. But every difficult step was worth it. These days, when Ethan calls me boss, I smile. Not because I need his validation, but because it's a reminder of how far we've both come. He's a better leader, husband, and father. And I'm a better version of myself than I ever imagined possible. Last week, Riley asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and we both laughed at the absurdity of the question. But then I thought about it seriously. I want to be exactly who I am, I told her. Strong, independent, useful on my own terms. And someday when you're older and life knocks you down, because it will, I want you to remember your grandma Diane. Remember that it's never too late to start over. Never too late to become who you're meant to be. She hugged me tight. I'll remember, Grandma. You're like a superhero or something. Not a superhero. Just a woman who refused to disappear. Just a woman who learned that old doesn't mean useless, that endings can be beginnings, and that the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to let anyone else write your story. So did I do the right thing? Tell me what you think. Tell me if this story resonated with you. If you've ever felt discarded or invisible or used up. Tell me if you're ready to write your own second chapter. Because here's what I know now. Life doesn't end when people stop seeing you. It begins when you start seeing yourself. If you like this story, hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe to get more stories from me. With love and respect, Auntie Helen Stories.